As 2020 Democrats descend on Iowa to slam President Trump, frontrunner Joe Biden is doing his best to rebound from a bruising debate performance, which included a showdown with Kamala Harris over his past position on race.
Were you prepared for them to come after you?
I was prepared for them to come after me, but I wasn't prepared for the person coming at me the way she came out. She knew Bo. She knows me. But here's the deal. What I do know, and it's the good and the bad news, the American people think they know me, and they know me.
The former VP also revealing how he plans to take down President Trump.
How do you beat him?
I beat him by just pointing out who I am and who he is and what we're for and what he's against. This guy is a divider in chief. This guy is acting with racist policies. This guy is moving to foment hate, to split. That's the only way he can sustain himself. The idea that I'd be intimidated by Donald Trump, he's the bully that I knew my whole life. He's the bully that I've always stood up to. He's the bully I used to make fun when I was a kid in the stutter and I smacked him in the mouth.
Juan, he talks a tough game, but when Kamala Harris had him against the ropes, he's essentially said no mas.
I don't know about
time ran out.
You know what? It's very interesting, Lawrence, because in that interview, he gave the impression that he really wasn't ready to be challenged in that way. And if that's true, boy, that's big trouble, because he should have known that as the front runner, there were long knives ready for him. That's how other people were going to rise and challenge him as the front runner. It's exactly what Kamala Harris did. She took command of the stage, and it's the reason why we've seen her jump ahead in the polls. I think what you're seeing there is he's trying to strike the right tone. He doesn't want to be too aggressive in trying to take her out, and he says he's not going to play that game. Maybe he can have his surrogates, his aides, plant stories and go after her in that fashion. But I think he wants to remain as if he's above the fray, that he's the front runner.
John, he wants to remain above the fray until he accuses of the president of being essentially racist. I mean, he pretty much said it right there.
Right.
And so is this his strategy, just to target, say, all the supporters, the president, everybody that supports Trump, they're just racist?
Man, I mean, you're playing Trump's game. I think Trump became president because he was out there throwing haymakers. And I think they think that's how they're going to beat him, but I don't really think that's how you beat him. I think you're just playing his ball game when you step into that, and he loves that. And so now Biden's having haymakers thrown at him. You wouldn't have seen that in the past couple of elections. Nobody talked like that. Nobody might smacking somebody in the mouth or anything like that. But, it looks like to me Biden, I said this earlier, he's been left, as in he can't go. I don't think it's in his nature to go that left, but he's kind of out of his comfort zone because he's having to go that left to be able to have the same conversation everybody else is having.
But I think in that interview, he sort of said, you know what, I'm not as far left as everybody else is, and I'm the one who's been in Washington. I know how to get things done. I'm just going to marinate where I am right now. I think he was just sort of sitting there, staying in his lane. There's no way he can run as an outsider. How long has he been in Washington? So if he runs on saying, I've got this place figured out, I can get things done, I'm the one who's looking forward to the general election to try to beat Donald Trump rather than dealing with all of this, then maybe he's struck a chord.
He addresses some of the politics when it comes to the progressive wing and AOC. I think we have some sound. Let's take a look.
80% of your party says it's center-left.
No, I am center-left.
Farther left is getting more attention. It's getting amplified.
It is. Look.
There's a disconnect.
Look, it's center-left. That's where I am. Where it's not is way left. By the way, I think Ocasio-Cortez is a brilliant, bright woman, but she won a primary. In the general election fights, who won? Mainstream Democrats who are very progressive on social issues and very strong on education, health care. Look, my North Star is the middle class. When the middle class does well, everybody does well.
Tammy, if that's the case, then why is he flip-flopping on everything?
Well, I think what people are missing is that his reaction in and of itself to what Ms. Harris did reminds you that there's never been a real competitive primary for either party. The first one was with Trump, and now this one, is that he didn't expect to be held accountable. He didn't expect someone else in that lineup to say something harsh or to maybe tell the truth or what they saw as the truth, because, gosh, they know each other. This reveals to everyone the fact that this has been kind of a sham from the beginning, which is what all Americans in both parties have rejected and haven't liked. This idea that this is prearranged, that he's the one who's supposed to get it, and he's got that kind of demeanor. Now, I agree. The Democratic voter is not the Democrat or the liberal on Twitter. It is someone who's much more quiet and who's watching. But then if that is the case, then he should have no problem. But what he knows is that Kamala Harris is going to cast herself as that. So he knows he's not running against Sandy Ocasio-Cortez. He's running against, Kamala Harris, who's going to shift. No one's going to be running in the end in the general as on the left, but they've got to pander in a certain way. So I think Joe Biden, and then just ultimately what people don't like is, and I don't think he understands the irony, of complaining about Trump being the divider and then trying to, disembowel him with his, he's a racist. I punch these guys in the mouth. Nobody wants that. And
right.
Especially when it's not natural, when you're trying to play a role in a certain way.
Well, I don't think it's unnatural given some of the statements Trump has made on race, but I think the bigger point right now is that we got another debate in 3 weeks. And so you're going to have a higher bar, and it's going to be tough again for Joe Biden because he looked bad coming out of that debate, and other people made up ground. So people are going to be looking to punch again at Joe Biden. He better figure out how to deal with this. My sense is, though, that Joe Biden's claim at this moment, Tammy, is that he's the most electable Democrat running against Donald Trump.
Even though he's on the ropes?
Even at this moment. Remember, he still is in the lead. I mean, there's some polls that have, I think it's Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders within 5 points.
But still, that's misleading because, of course, this is going state by state. You're looking at most of this is like national approval. It's going to show very differently as they go into each state for the primaries. And then the debates is still going to matter.
Real quick,
his attitude.
how do you feel about Kamala's reversal when it comes to the busing issue? The back and forth.
To me, I think that there's a lot of pressure from the left, as all of you guys have been saying on the panel today. But to my mind, the only way we've made progress on civil rights in this country is by dealing with people who have racist views, trying to work something out and make steady progress that has taken us to what I think is the best point in American history for people of color. So,
well, I think it's pretty shady that she made it a central issue and then reversed on it for the American people. It seems like it was staged.
What do you mean she reversed on it?
She went back and forth on it.
The social media campaign was ready to go. That
the same position as Joe Biden. She essentially has the same.
No.
She made it
now on busing in terms of saying that we should have incentives to promote school integration.
It's the same position as Joe Biden.